Welcome to the WCBS Conversation on Your First Job. I'm Steven Greenberg, host of Your Next Job on WCBS and CBS stations around the country. We're coming to you from the Adorama Live Theater here in Soho. Today we're going to discuss how college students can turn their chances of turning a college degree into a good job. And there are no better people to talk to about this than our three panelists here today. I've interviewed the heads of hiring for leading employers around the country, and I'm very pleased to say I have three of the very best with us today. And I'd like to welcome our guest. At the end is Dan Black. Dan is in charge of all hiring in the Americas for Ernst & Young. Dan, as part of Ernst & Young, is responsible for about 13,000 university hires every year in the Americas. And he's also a board member and past president of the National Association of Colleges and Employers. Next to Dan is the head of university hiring for Citibank, Aaron Goldberg. Welcome, Aaron. Aaron oversees about 600 new hires of college students for full-time and intern positions each year. So if Dan and Aaron wanted to get together, they can outdo Ellen and Oprah. They can give everybody here a job before they leave, which would be a really nice thing to do. And then next to me here is Liz Wessel. Just a few years ago, Liz quit her job at Google to found Way Up. It is a wildly popular and rapidly growing platform that uses algorithms to help match college students with jobs and internships at top employers. And over 5,000 employers are already using Way Up. Welcome, one and all. It's great to have you here today to answer some questions. You know, we're turning the table on you a little bit because you're normally the ones asking them. So I hope you're suitably nervous, you know, the way candidates generally are. Let's start with the big picture first, okay? And it's this, 27% of all jobs in the US economy today require a college degree, but 47% of our workforce has a college degree. And then into that market every year, we're adding 2 to 3 million college graduates. So competition is intense for these good jobs. Who's winning the battle to get hired? Is there one common trait that you see in these candidates that are getting hired? You know, many of the college students have resumes that look quite similar, but what qualities separates the good candidates from the great ones that get the offers? Liz, we'll start with you.
I can speak from a data perspective on a higher level, and the one trait that we see that always gets a candidate the job or even the interview over another candidate with every other data point being identical is their work experience, but specifically how interesting or unique their experience might be. So did they start a business in college? Did they work at a really interesting company or have a really interesting job at a company? So often, I know it sounds silly because it's this chicken and egg problem of, well, how did they get the first job? And that's why, you know, we created Way Up as well. But at the end of the day, I would say it's the work experience that the student is coming with.
Yeah, absolutely agree. I mean, the work experience has to make sense within a college student's story, right? So when I'm coaching college students, you know, I often talk about having a strong why, right? Why are you in this interview room? How does it connect to your story? And how does your story connect to the skills and qualifications that an employer is really looking for? For me, ultimately, you know, and I hear from a lot of the folks that work at Citi, it's about a sense of natural curiosity, having learned how to learn. Because in our business, you know, from a financial services perspective, it really is an apprenticeship business in the sense that we will teach you everything you need to know to work in our industry. You have to demonstrate that you're both qualified from an analytical perspective and also genuinely interested in working in our business. So it's that curiosity that really sets people apart.
Interesting. Dan?
So I would say if I love those two answers. I love going third, by the way. If those two things get you into the interview room, what gets you out the other side when you're compared to lots of other people that have similar qualifications, at least on your resume, comes down to two things a lot of times for us, which is attitude and integrity. Now, attitude, you know, better defined probably is, you know, you have an interest in my company, not any company, my company. You can express why you have that interest. You have a natural curiosity, as Aaron said. You have some sense of your purpose, at least for the first several years within your career, as opposed to, hey, I'm great, I'm here in the interview room, you're gonna wanna hire me because I have an X GPA from X school. That attitude sets apart. The integrity piece is, if you just read the paper online, everything that's wrong with business stems back to a lack of integrity, in my opinion, or most of it. And so students that can exemplify that the pursuit, or as part of the pursuit of their education or their job, also included a strong moral fiber, a strong commitment to their purpose, right, and to their own ethical standards is huge.
So I'd like this discussion today really to focus on the practical, real-world steps that college students can take to improve their chances. And you're the best people to give that advice. So when you say they should exemplify integrity, I mean, what kind of things can they do that will manifest those traits?
Right. So it comes in two basic categories. Number one is show me those things throughout the process. So for example, hey Dan, I'll send you an email with the updated resume, or I'll come and see you after the career fair because I have a question for you. Actually following through on what you said you would do, that's an example right there. The other thing is you do have an opportunity through most interviews to share live, real examples of things that you've done in your past. So I think a lot of students that I talk to come in saying, hey, I'll see what the questions I get and I'll answer them the best I can. But coming in prepared with actual stories, actual instances from your past that say, hey, I was faced with a, kind of a question of ethics, and here's how I came out the other side. Here's what I did. That's a very good indicator that in the future, when faced with something similar, you're likely to have a similar reaction.
Does anybody else have any particular examples of how to manifest the kind of traits that you're looking for?
Yeah, I completely agree with what Dan said, actually. He hit the nail on the head on both sides of that. One, actually doing what you're going to say you're going to do. On the other hand, I think we're going to give you an opportunity, much to sort of restate what Dan said, to actually tell us about times where you've been in situations where you've had to make tough decisions. And oftentimes in our business, we'll refer to that as a situational or a behavioral interview question. And it's pretty formulaic. You want to take the interviewer through the situation you were in, the tasks that you had to do, the actions that you took, and probably most importantly, the results that you got. We actually call that the STAR method, right? It actually has an acronym. And
I'm stealing that, by the way.
Exactly.
I just want to tell you right now.
It's beautiful because those situational and behavioral questions are trying to get at a couple things. One is the actual question. Tell me about a time when you had to deal with a difficult group of people, right? They're also sort of testing how you organize your thinking. And that framework, that STAR method, is a fantastic way to show an interviewer not only do you have the experience dealing with difficult situations, but you're well organized and you think in a rational way.
To piggyback off of that, even taking it another step, as I'm sure everyone watching knows, there's been a lot of problems recently with millennials having really high churn and quitting their jobs pretty quickly. It's like 70 or 80%, I think, leave their jobs within the first year after college. It's some crazy percentage. And so I actually know a lot of people on the integrity side and like the situational side are asking a lot of questions around, tell me about a time that things were not good for you and you stuck with it, and they really want to hear, or like, do you get bored easily? What do you do when you get bored? And so questions like that, which show like, do you have commitment too?
On the subject of turnover, because it's a great point, is that something that's on your minds as employers? Are you looking for signs in candidates that this person is likely to stay more than 3 years or 5 years? And can a candidate help themselves by bringing that up affirmatively in the process?
Yeah, I'd say yes, although I would say times have changed. So I started with EY, back in the 1920s, obviously. And back then, if you got any kind of question about where do you see yourself in 5 years, or how long would you be with the company, you better say forever, or that is the last time you're having that conversation. Right. I think we're a lot more realistic about it, Steven, now. We want people, we expect them to have a start that's several years, but it's also incumbent upon the company to show why you might want to stay longer than that. So we have to show, well, there's going to be development opportunities and lots of variety for you. And if we don't do a good job doing that, I can't expect a candidate to say, well, I'm going to stay here forever no matter what happens. I think a candidate can say, to do themselves a favor, to say, well, if there are great opportunities and great people like you're saying, I'd be happy to explore all kinds of options with your company. I think that's a good thing.
Liz mentioned earlier that work experience is the key in getting the interview to begin with. So a lot of college students may be watching or thinking, what value does the experience that I have, what does it have to potential employers? I worked as a counselor, I did whatever. I think a lot of candidates undervalue that kind of experience. I think there's enormous things you can extrapolate from whatever job you've had. I'd like your opinion on that.
Yeah, so 100% correct. The first time I stepped foot in an office was at Ernst & Young, in 1994. Prior to that, all my jobs, I was a lawnmower, I was a busboy, I was a hitman for a few years. Anything you do in New York to make money. And students today, there are so many transferable skills that they miss the opportunity to talk about. So I talked to a young lady actually last week. I was out in Texas at Texas A&M University, and they said, she said, all I do is babysitting. So you care for another human being's life that someone has entrusted you? Is that all you do? And she said, and the light bulb went on. So you're absolutely right. You know, finding a way to tell your story, as Aaron said, in a way that is compelling, but also, you know, highlights the things that you can do that can be transferred into the new setting, the corporate setting.
100%. Everything you do is transferable and is relatable. I mean, in my business, we talk about it being a trust-based, relationship-driven business. Everything that we do as college students, as young adults, it's all about relationships, and even more so in your professional or corporate life or whatever you choose to do later. So for college students, again, going back to those situational behavioral questions, opportunities to actually insert your experience into the interview, it's all relationship. It's all about relationships.
And by the way, it's never been easier for college students to get jobs because of the internet and the fact that half the jobs people are getting are now like virtual jobs. You can do online tutoring, you can do Uber driving, which I know it sounds like Uber driving, how is that going to get me a summer internship? But like there's a lot of responsibility. You're almost running your own business. And if you could take into like how you're increasing your margins or whatever it might be, there are ways to spin every story.
I love stories of how students will break through the pack. And there's so much competition to get interviews. And occasionally you hear about creative, interesting ways that candidates have come up with to stand out. I'll just tell you what, I was an HR manager at a toy company. I've told this story on the air on CBS before, but one of our big products was wooden puzzles. And we had a candidate who decided he sent little pieces of puzzle to us each week, and it was pieces of his resume. And so he completely flipped the process on us. We couldn't wait for the mail to come by the third week because we were putting together his resume as a puzzle, and he managed to stand out and get interviewed that way. What kinds of things have you seen, if any, that allowed these candidates to stand out?
I don't have anything nearly as good as that. And in banking, I suggest you not send your resume in pieces. Just it might be a little tip there, but you know, I think risk is something that has to be calculated. But
Spoken like a banker. Yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
if you have to, if you're going to take a risk, make sure you're prepared to take that risk. You know, so I had an amazing experience actually last week at Georgetown with a student. I give a presentation called How to Get the Job at Citi, and it walks students, particularly freshmen and sophomores, through the process to interview for banking. What actually happens? And there's a part where I talk about in an interview, a lot of our interviewers will ask a student to make a stock pick, right? And that gives them an opportunity to show that they're interested in the markets and they have a little bit of analytical understanding of how things work. And so I give a talk about how to do that. And at the end of it, I say usually to students, does anyone want to try in the audience giving a stock pick? I won't ask you guys to do it. But I last week had a student at Georgetown who normally nobody raises their hand. Nobody wants to do this because all of our business people are there. I had a young man in the second row raise his hand. I called on him. He stood up. What I didn't realize is that he had a pretty significant speech impediment. But there he was in front of 150 of his peers, 30 or 40 bankers, myself, the team. He stood up and delivered an incredible stock pitch while working through this speech impediment. And that was a risk. He could have, he was clearly nervous, but he could have really sort of put himself out there in a bad way, but he knew what he was talking about. And the bankers were super impressed. Everybody wanted to meet that student. So, I mean, that's a sort of extreme example, but he definitely took a risk and it paid off.
He was pitching way up, by the way, so it just went to, so way to go. Similar, I think some calculated moves can come off as too contrived or not, disingenuous maybe. I like students, and this happens a lot, where they get a curveball, whether it's a question or a situation, they'll be able to react very well to it in a creative way. So I was interviewing at my alma mater at Binghamton University a number of years ago, and the career services department at that time was in the basement. And there were no windows, so it was a very, very kind of somber place. And I'm interviewing this candidate, and we're about as far from each other as we are today, Steven, and the lights went out. I mean, pitch black, couldn't see your hand 6 inches in front of your face. And he was right in the middle of what was a very poignant experience that he wanted to convey to me. So I just kind of sat there for a second, not sure if the lights would come back on, and within 2 seconds, a lighter lit up, right? He had a lighter with him. And he
That's
continued his
great.
story as if nothing had happened.
That's amazing.
And by the way, and then he finished his story and he let go and it was dark again. And I was like, I was creeped out. I was amazed. I mean, we hired that guy. You know, he's a partner at EY now. But that ability to, you know, to show in a very real way how you react under pressure, which comes with all of our professions, frankly, is a big deal. That's a big deal.
I work with a number of college students, counseling them, and many of them maybe have great skills. They may be great students. I know one day they're going to go and work for a company and be a tremendous asset for years and years to come. But they just may not be great candidates, right? They may have a hard time selling themselves. And I think this is a very common feeling that many students have, that just give me a chance. Just let me in the door and let me start working and you'll see how great I am. But as a candidate, I have a hard time talking about myself. I have a hard time selling myself. What advice do you have for these candidates?
Practice. Practice, practice, practice. You know, if you're showing up to an interview and it's the first time you're telling your story, that's a bad way to go. I would not suggest doing that. I would find any way possible to practice. Call your mom, walk through your story with your mom, do it in front of your friends, do it in front of the mirror, record yourself doing it. You know, I once had someone suggest that you actually take a few job interviews with companies that you're not so interested in as sort of a low-risk environment. That's, you know, that could be a little bit controversial. You don't want to waste anybody's time, but whatever way you can practice, it's only going to benefit you in the way you read in an interview.
But how should they be practicing? What are some of the things that make for great interviewees in job interviews?
You know, the biggest thing and the underlying or overarching theme for me is know what you're selling. I think so many students think that the right interviewee or the right thing that the company wants to see or the person they want to talk to looks like X. And they're not X. So not everyone is the 4.0 GPA. Not everyone is I did 100,000 things on, you know, I was the jock and also was involved in student government and the like. If you can spend, it doesn't take long, 30 minutes, and I think Liz can talk about, you know, how you do this, right? 30 minutes thinking about, okay, what is it that makes me a good candidate or a unique candidate and selling that story. So I've met a lot of candidates that don't tell me about their academics. Their academics are fine. They talk to me about what they're passionate about, the charity they're involved in, or the student government, or the fraternity, or what have you. And that's when the real them comes out. And when you're your honest, authentic self, that's when you can sell yourself the best.
I would say on top of practice, research. A lot of companies actually, whether it be on websites where it's kind of user-generated content, or it's the companies actually putting it out themselves and saying, here are some of the questions that we're probably going to ask, or questions like this. I'm sure the stock pick question could be found somewhere on the internet if you looked up how to city interview for this specific position. So I would say do your research. We're starting to actually create videos with brands, with companies where we actually have HR people and interviewers doing mock interviews, and we're recording them and putting them out to our users. And so we just did an ad sales one with Snapchat, and we got so many responses already from students who were saying, I didn't even know what ad sales was, so I had no idea how to actually interview for it. And so watching these types of interviews, just research. And
it seems increasingly employers will hold it against candidates who have not done their research on. There's so much information available on most every employer that if you're coming in and asking questions that are easily answerable
shows you don't care.
Absolutely. I talk about all the time, the Q&A section of an interview, that last 6 minutes, is incredibly important to that decision about what's going to happen next with your candidacy. Doing the research beforehand allows you to ask intelligent questions. There are things that you should know, at a firm like ours. Who's the CEO? What's the share price? What are other analysts saying about our firm at the moment? And by extension, I shared earlier that our business is very much an apprenticeship business. We will teach you actually through formal training a lot of things that you need to know to work at Citi. But in order to demonstrate your interest, you also have to know what's going on in the world, right? Picking up the Wall Street Journal, reading the Times, Bloomberg, Economist, listening to the news radio. That stuff all is huge for us because we need to know that you're really demonstrating that you're interested in our industry, and what's going on in the world really affects our industry.
Is that what you're seeing also, Liz, that other companies, I mean, do employers want to know that their candidates are knowledgeable about what's going on in the world?
100%.
Yeah.
Like, no question. And by the way, one other thing to add that we hear a lot when we ask, can you just rate your candidates and what stood out about them, what stood out about them in a negative way as well. Often enthusiasm is one of the top things if the candidate was enthusiastic. And if the candidate was nervous, it is just so apparent.
That's so true. That's so true, Liz. Similar.
Just like enthusiasm. I know it sounds silly, but like
Yeah.
smiling and,
Right.
you know, like making sure your hands aren't too sweaty when you shake their hand. It's these little things that really add up.
I can't tell you how many employers have told me that as part of their evaluation process, they'll ask the receptionist, how did the candidate greet you when they walked in? If somebody in the lobby, I mean, it may sound trivial, but it actually matters to many employers.
There was just a CEO, I don't know if you were going to say this, there was just a CEO who, I forget who it was, but he took someone out for breakfast as part of the interview, and he made sure that the waiter or the waitress messed up the order, the breakfast order, so that the CEO could see how that person would react and treat that person. So the answer is absolutely everything is part of the interview. Once you step into the building, it's all fair game.
One other thing to add, we talked about how easy it is to get this information now, like the stock price, or you can control the internet and find out lots of great information. I think probably one of the most underused resources is other people that already work at the company. And so you can find a ton of things about EY. We've got great websites, we've got, but if you can talk to one of my former interns, who, by the way, is probably in class with you, or you could find a way to connect with them through social media or some other way, you're going to get a lot richer of an experience and a background and come in probably with a better knowledge of who we are, B, better questions, because you've heard, oh, I heard this from one of your employees. Tell me more about that. And C, you're going to show that you went beyond just your keyboard to find out about my company. And today, that's actually saying something.
Right.
Yeah.
We're going to turn to the audience for some questions in a minute. So if you have any questions, feel free to write them down or get them together. We'll be doing that in 1 minute. On the subject of the kind of major that you're having in college, I get a lot of questions about this from listeners on CBS. Oh my God, my son or daughter is majoring in sociology or history or poli-sci. Am I wasting $50,000 a year? What's your view? I mean, your realistic view. Are these people actually getting hired, or is there a disadvantage to being a liberal arts major?
See how they both looked at me?
That's right, Dan.
They're like, you're the accountant, you figure it out, you got the numbers. So the short answer is no. The short answer is no. They're not wasting their time. What I will say is if they're aspiring to be an attorney or a banker or something that is requires technical academic background, an accountant. Look at my field. We hire about 50% of all of our hires from campus are accountants. You are not allowed. You cannot legally be a certified public accountant unless you take a certain number of accounting courses. So you could be the smartest anthropology major in the world. You can't be certified. Therefore, I can't put you in front of a client. That said, we have a whole other side of our business as the city and other companies that do look for what I call GSPs, good, smart people, right? And so while in maybe a leaner time, it may be a little tougher if you're not one of those more technical majors, if you can sell yourself, if you can show that you've got stick-to-itiveness and the great attitude and the desire to work there, it might require a little extra legwork on your part, but by no means are you kind of out of the job race because you picked that major.
Yeah, and from my perspective, same answer. The answer is no. I mean, I can tell you from our statistics, it's about 53% of the students that we hire are either business or finance students, and the other basically 50% come from all walks of life. And that's actually very important to our firm. This idea of diversity of thought as another dimension of diversity that we measure in the workplace. It's not as quantifiable, but we can certainly track the majors that we're hiring. And so I totally agree with what Dan said. If you are one of those technical majors, it's going to be easier for you, particularly during training, right? Because you won't have to learn the basic accounting and you won't have to learn about valuation, corporate finance. But for the art history majors, the music majors, the math and the econ and the poli-sci, we will teach you everything you need to know, and odds are the perspective that you do bring will make you valuable and unique, and that's actually an asset.
From a data perspective, so when a business posts a job on WayUp, they'll specify who they want to see their job, so you only get applicants who are qualified. And so one of the filters you can use is major, and it's like 80 to 90% of the jobs do not have a major requirement. I really don't care what your major is. The jobs that do are engineering more than anything, which makes sense.
Sure.
Although a lot of people now code on the side, so people are even starting to say, even if you minor, that's okay. And then the arts, actually, we see a lot of like the arts. So whether it be like I only I only want a photography major or whatever it might be. We see that often, actually. And then, of course, finance. That's pretty much it, actually, on our end.
Well, and medical. You know, it's not like, oh, I'd love to be a doctor. It's just all that science that's fuzzy.
Right.
I'd like a doctor to
I'm talking
study
undergrads.
medicine.
I'm talking undergrads. So.
Okay. Tim, do we have any questions from the audience? Can we?
Hello, my name is Chaim Shapiro. I work in career services at Touro College. So one of the things that I really do is try to prepare students to be ready to interview with people like you. One of the things that I wonder is that avoiding some of the mistakes people make on Facebook and social media, what kinds of things do students do or can students do on social media that really makes them stand out to you as candidates?
Yeah, let's talk about the grandma test. Basically, anytime you post anything, and this might apply to your personal life as well. I won't tell you how to behave, but you might think very quickly before you post whatever that is. If my grandmother or grandfather or whoever that person over your shoulder is that tells you is your voice of consciousness, if you have any concern that that person might not enjoy seeing what you're about to post, it might be time to take your finger off the mouse.
Right. But that's what not to do, I guess. But what can they affirmatively do to get the job? Yeah.
So I think LinkedIn is a really interesting environment for students because I think I'm fascinated by the way that students use LinkedIn because I think the way that baby boomers and even Gen Xers and certainly traditionalists, the way they see LinkedIn is actually significantly different than the way college students see LinkedIn. I think college students see LinkedIn as an extension of Facebook, right? This virtual environment where it's okay to talk to everyone. I think everybody else who's in the workforce, I think they think about LinkedIn much more as their physical network, right? So they think about it as if I'm sitting around with a group of my friends and all of a sudden here comes this college student barreling into the conversation. So I think, proactively speaking, LinkedIn is a great tool for follow-up. So if you meet Dan Black, as a college student, you could only hope to meet Dan Black. And you meet Dan Black and you have a great conversation with him and there are a few memorable points that you talked with about Dan. I would say going back to LinkedIn, sending him a request and then in that note, including some of the things that you did discuss that were interesting and maybe even ending that with an ask, would you be able to connect me to some other folks in your network who might be able to tell me a little bit more about your business? If you use LinkedIn as part of the process and not a sourcing tool for jobs, it's probably not going to work for college students, but you can do that well. And the LinkedIn folks also publish some really good tips and tricks that I refer students to all the time, actually about how college students should prepare their profiles.
I was going to say, and I definitely think LinkedIn messaging is awesome. I do think that a lot of recruiters know that whatever students post on LinkedIn is probably meant for the recruiter to actually see, so it might not be necessarily super true because I don't think students communicate with one another on LinkedIn. What I will say is HR recruiters are on Twitter, period. Every conference I go to with recruiters, they're on Twitter. So if
Are these old economy companies as well as the newer companies?
Oh, yeah.
Across the board, yeah. And so, I know everyone in media is saying Twitter might die, but everyone I talk to is in the HR world is on Twitter. Maybe it's keeping it afloat. But at the end of the day, if students are tweeting about things that are actually relevant to the industry they want to go into or the company they want to go into, whether it be, hey, I just watched this really cool marketing video about this brand, wow, really makes me want to work there even more, or whatever it might be. Maybe don't be too specific to one company because if another company sees, they might not like you. But I think showing that intellectual curiosity and that you're actually doing your research and posting about it on a network that isn't necessarily only professional, I think that will really also help.
Yeah, the other thing, the question came from someone in career services, go to career services. There is no shortage of people whose job it is to help you do this very thing,
Totally.
whether it's mock interview or take a look at your resume, and ever more now, looking at your social media profile. And so I know Chaim himself, I know personally, he's done this for hundreds and hundreds of students. But avail yourselves of the resources because if you don't, that's just another indicator that maybe you didn't go that extra mile, maybe you're not that interested, maybe you're not that, do the follow-up. So find things, especially these things are free, find them and use them.
Career services know the little tips and tricks on some recruiters. I'm sure he gives little tips about you,
No question about it.
I have a Dan Black folder,
Yeah.
actually. I keep my files on Dan Black. I just talk about the Rangers, and then we're happy.
There we go.
Yeah, not only are those resources free, but if you're a student at that university, you're actually paying for those
Entitled.
resources. That is your service service that you are not taking advantage of. And we can pretty easily tell the difference between the students who do take advantage of those resources and the students who do not. I couldn't tell you exactly, but I could give you a pretty reasonable sense.
One of the funny things in career services, we talk about trying to get students to come. And I think it should be such an obvious proposition for them, but it's not necessarily, because there's so much value we can add. And we're trying to get students, we're out there on the tabling and trying to hand out donuts or whatever to get people to come. But the real value is in their ability to really interview well and actually succeed as employees after they interview by coming to career services and learning those skills.
Well, it gets to a larger point, which is so many college students are really focused on getting through college, but they aren't as focused as they probably should be on getting a great job. You know, it's really interesting to me. You talk to high school students even, they're so focused, they know how to get into college, right? They know how to pad their applications, they know about the Reach College and how you're gonna get there, but very few college students talk about a Reach employer. And how am I gonna get that? What are the steps I need to take to get that job? And you know, hopefully things like this will open their eyes and say, well, there really are steps that you can take to maximize your chances.
I mean, that is brilliant, Steven, because a lot of students I meet either don't wait too long to think about their job or think about it so narrowly that they're missing opportunities. I mean, you look at the three of us in the stage, the four of us on this stage, how many of us started in the profession that we're in now? Zero.
Not me, right.
How many of us thought, you know, did I think I was going to be in HR when I was studying accounting at Binghamton University? No way.
Right.
And so having that open mind, you know, again, finding out about what's available to you earlier on, and as early as possible, it takes, 15 minutes to stop by career services when you're a freshman, can open some doors.
Right.
I'm such a big believer in also just trying to get, so I mentioned earlier that like it's not good to quit your job after you graduate every 6 months, but it is okay to kind of do that during college if you have one job first semester, one job second semester, one job during the summer. It's not just good for like your resume, but it's also honestly, it's good for you to figure out what you like doing, what you don't like doing, what you're good at, where you need to improve. That's why so many of our jobs are great for freshmen, or they might be virtual jobs that really anyone is qualified for. So.
The other piece here is that for better or worse, the process is continually starting earlier and earlier for college students. And that's something that has to be on the radar. I mean, I would suggest when you get to college as a freshman, you figure out where class is and where the bathroom is and take care of business and get your GPA in a really good place. But pretty quickly after that, it's time to start thinking about recruiting. And that's a lot of pressure that even 5-10 years ago didn't exist to the extent it does now. Certainly in my industry in financial services, we are very much engaged with freshmen. We are very, very much engaged with sophomores. Even in the fall of their sophomore year, we'll see this coming fall that a lot of the sophomores will actually interview for summer 2017 roles in September and October of 2016. So your point is absolutely spot on. It has to be something that's on the radar, pretty soon into the process.
Okay, thanks. And thank you for that question. Anyone else?
Thank you. Collectively, between the four of you, you've all probably in the course of your careers worked with thousands, hundreds, if not thousands of career service offices, both domestically and internationally. What's your opinion of the state in general of college career service offices?
Trying to get us into deep water, huh?
I can speak firsthand as like a very unbiased perspective because we really like partnering with career services, but we don't need to. Like we work directly with students, so if they want to work with us, we love it. If they don't, then it's no harm. I would say. This is such a weird answer, but it is always for me either hot or cold. This person is either an amazing career services professional, and by the way, it's usually honestly from what I see coming from the top. It's like the director and who's that leader, or they are absolutely a 9 to 5. I will not work a minute out of those hours. And to be honest, like I play by the traditional rules that I've learned 20 years ago when I started. You've got incredible career service professionals that literally are responsible for thousands of people's jobs. And it is sometimes a shame to see the others. And I think that at the end of the day, my only like tip for universities is I'm starting to hear that university administrations are starting to actually talk to students and find out what they think. And that is like so key because students often have a really good sense of how good or bad they are.
Well, increasingly the pressure is coming from the parents who, right, when they go on tours these days, they're not just asking, where's the gymnasium, let me see the dorms. They're like, show me your stats on the jobs that graduates are getting.
It's all about ROI, yeah.
So, and Dan and Aaron, I know you spend a great deal of your time traveling around and are are on college campuses. So what are you seeing?
You know, it runs the gamut. You know, I think Liz hit it on the head. And if you're in career services, like any profession, if you think that what made you successful 20 years ago is going to do the same thing today, you're in for a rude awakening, right? And so those career services departments, offices, directors that are evolving into being more proactive, thinking more about social media, thinking about better ways to reach students, retooling students. I mean, we're doing the same thing at EY. We're thinking about what are those new skills, the different skills that are not going to help us today, but help us be successful in 5 years. Career services needs to be on par or, in fact, ahead of that. And honestly, there are so many career services departments. You know, I was with NACE. I got to interact with so many that do a phenomenal job. But if you're not sure, ask the students. They'll tell you. And then ask your employers. We'd be happy to work with you.
Excellent. Any other questions?
It's so cool. It's dark out there. We can't see where they're coming from.
No
It's
idea.
Like, it's voice of God.
We need that man with the lighter.
That's right.
Hi, I'm Nicole Biner. I've just had a debate with somebody about whether or not putting interests on your resume is good or bad. Because some people, either they go too far with it and put weird ones, or if I say I'm a fan of the Jets, will that stick with you as a recruiter?
If you're a fan of the Jets, we'll both take good care of you. No, so actually, I talk about this all the time. There is a certain probability that the person who will interview you, whether it's your first, second, and I don't care what interview it is, there's a probability they're going to spend a significant amount of time on that one line on the bottom of your resume. Right. And what I think is so funny is that every student in America is interested in skiing, travel, and food. You don't know how many resumes I see, skiing, travel, and food. I don't ski. Apparently everyone else is. I'm missing out. Right. But invest some time in that line on your resume. For me, I know for our bankers, our hiring managers, you know, last time I was here with Steve, we talked about the LAX test, right? If I'm in LAX with you and our flight just got canceled and I have to spend the next 6 hours with you, after about the 4th or the 5th hour, am I going to still want to talk to you? And the truth is that works because we spend a lot of time together, right? Sitting on a desk in banking or in sales and trading, you're there 12, 14, maybe sometimes longer.
18.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of hours. And a successful team involves fit, and it involves a culture. And our most successful teams are our most successful people, right? It's all connected. So I'm 100% answering yes, that not only do they belong there, but it's something worth really thinking about. Yeah.
So to all of you, are you suggesting that then you should expand beyond the skiing, traveling, and food, right? You want to go as esoteric as you can, maybe. In the
Be authentic.
Yeah.
Be yourself, like Dan said. Look, the people that work with us, who do the hiring, if not ourselves, we're all reasonably smart people and are actually really good. We're professionally really good at sort of figuring out when someone is not being, or when someone is being disingenuous. So as long as you're being yourself, let yourself shine through. Tell your story. And you'll be good to go.
But this gets to the question, what do you look at first when you look at a resume? Because, you know, as a former HR manager myself, I'll tell you that interest is one of the first things I look at. All the resumes all tend to look the same, and interest is actually something that, you know, has potential to be different from the other 50 resumes you're looking at that morning.
Yeah. I mean, what will happen is there'll be some kind of cut, typically, whether it's online or on campus. We want X major or X GPA, right? A lot of companies do that. So I definitely look at interests. I look at the story. And so I do want to know how you're doing in school. Because if you're a full-time student, I want to know what your grades are, certainly. But there is something about you that should stand out, should pop out of that resume. And whether it's, you know, this one's an academic. She's been on the dean's list. She has a 4.5 GPA. You want that to be highlighted. Some people will say, well, I'm into my fraternity. I can tell because that's 3/4 of the page, and this leadership, this, that. But whatever that is, I mean, Aaron said, you know, be authentic, but make sure that also stands out. And so I look at what is the theme of this resume, and is that person passionate and successful within that theme?
One of the interesting things about Way Up is, I think, you're really forcing students to make those, you know, to specify what is that's best about them for those particular jobs.
You have to answer the question, what is a fun fact about you on your profile? And recruiters love that. And you would never put that on your resume. One thing I was going to say was, by the way, not internet related, but a very common question we hear a lot from students that they get from interviewers is, what's something interesting about you that's not on your resume?
Totally.
And so while you should put all this interesting stuff on your resume, like just be
Save
prepared
something.
for that question. Don't necessarily not include it, but like know that they want to find out what else is not necessarily on your resume, even if you have 50 interests.
That question is real. I hear that question all the time. You know, it's like the last thing someone asks is, so you know, your resume looks great. What are you not telling me that I should know?
Really? And what kind of answers do you get to that?
That's often times where, you know, that's like could be one of those light bulb moments for
Right.
students where all of a sudden they start talking about their music or their volunteer work or their family or any affinity that they have. And that tends to be pretty memorable stuff.
Right.
You know, with that moment where a
Interesting.
student really lights up, passion is important.
I remember in college, a personal story. I was interviewing with a consulting firm, and they asked me the question, and I said, it was the first thing on my head. I don't know why I said it, but I was like, well, I got a grant from Penn to create to create an alcohol filtration device, which I'm currently in the middle of making and manufacturing. And the guy sat there, and he was like, why isn't that on your resume? And so it was funny. It's like that kind of thing happens, and it can really help you if you have a good answer.
I would have said the same thing. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I still want to know the answer to that.
Let's do something. I want to try a lightning round with you because I want to cover. There's so many topics I wanted to cover, and it takes so much time. So I'm
Should
going
we
to ask you.
stretch?
Yes. See, now you're nervous. Okay, good. Let's just a couple of quick things, and you give me your quick thoughts, and we'll get through this, and then maybe we'll have a few more questions and wrap up. First, what is the best answer for the dreaded salary question, right? When you ask, students hate to get asked this, but what kind of salary are you looking for? What do you do in response to that question?
Whatever's commensurate with what you're paying in your industry.
Is that a good enough answer?
At the entry level,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm actually not the best person to ask about that because when you join a program at Citi, that salary is actually set. As an analyst, you will be making this amount of money, and that's part of joining the program.
Startup or big company, I've never heard of entry-level positions having negotiation around salary, so I would agree.
What's the best question you were ever asked in a job interview?
Someone asked me, I thought this was great. If you could go back in time and tell 20-year-old Dan Black something about EY, something great and something awful, and something about yourself, what would it be? I was like, whoa, use better hair products. I don't know. but like, he made it so personal. He made me, because the question was, what do you like about the firm? What don't you like? But he really personalized. I thought that was great. Liz like that.
Yeah, I don't have something that good at all. And maybe I should get that list of hair products now.
Start early, young man.
Exactly. Yeah, no, I love when people ask me about why I'm excited to work at Citi because I genuinely like coming to work most days. I won't tell you every day.
Right.
But it's an exciting place to be, and for me, there are certain parts of it that are more exciting. And anytime that you can get somebody talking about themselves, that's a good thing for a student to be doing because it's an opportunity to learn, and it also feels good for the interviewer.
Questions I love getting are ones where they ask me, and then I say, well, why don't you answer first? So something like, what competitors do you have and what do you think about them and why are you better? And I'll say, why don't you answer that for me? And then I'll answer. That's something that people did to me actually at Google when I was interviewing, and I loved it. And it really put me on the spot, and I was not prepared, so I do it all the time.
What's your favorite question that you like to ask candidates in interviews?
Well, like it's what's not on your resume.
Yeah.
But I do ask, what is it about going to work that's going to make you excited and passionate every day? I have a lot of energy, so don't tell me about I want to be an analyst or I want to be an accountant. What's going to get you excited to jump out of bed every day?
Mine's pretty simple. Why Citi? Right? It's a really short question.
What's
it's actually
the best answer you've heard to that question?
The best answer are people who've done their homework, right? They understand the geopolitical environment. They understand what's going on in the markets. They understand what we do as a company and why we are a systemically important financial institution. There's lots of reasons you can talk about. Our globality is a great thing to talk about. So lots of different ways to answer it, but not an easy question to answer if you haven't done the homework.
The question I get the best answers to, so keep in mind I'm always the last interview for most roles,
Right.
and so I'm a fit interview. I'm not interviewing for skills usually. And so the question I love asking is, think about who in the world dislikes you the most of anyone in the world. If I found them right now and I asked them why they don't like you, why don't they like you?
Wow.
It's always good responses.
All right,
How many-
Dan, who doesn't
how many-
like you,
Is my
Dan?
wife on the line? I don't know. No.
How
I
many
love you,
ping
honey.
pong balls can you fit in a Boeing 787?
Right. That's my
I
next
won't
question,
do-
actually.
I won't do that.
Okay, do we have any other questions from the audience? Tim, I can't really see you, but I think there is. Hi.
Thank you so much. I am a retired youth counselor and job preparation person, recently retired last year, and I still do a little volunteer work. I basically worked about 32, 33 years with youth in foster care. One of the things that we were always challenged by is what you mentioned earlier in terms of work experience, paid or volunteer, internships, whatever they can do to get more prepared along with their college education. And we as an agency tried to provide as much as we could to help them gain those experiences since they were always from families who were struggling. One of the questions I have, work experience is always so emphasized, as you did as well. Would you advise a young person with a bachelor's degree, straight out of college, let's say this May, who's interviewing now, to pursue graduate school right away or delay for what period of time, if they should delay, to get more work experience?
I can speak for myself at least. I would say it depends. And I know that's such an annoying answer, but like if you want to go to med school or become a lawyer, it might make sense to go straight to grad school. Though I will say I know plenty of people who did 1 year of paralegal work and all of a sudden said, I'm never going to law school.
That happens a lot, actually.
Yeah. Although they could have learned that, by the way, in internships as well during undergrad. So I would say, I know that's an annoying answer, but it depends. That being said, if going to grad school is anything like starting a business, I remember I asked so many people what, just in terms of like kind of a big goal, I asked so many people, what should I do? Should I go to Google right after college, which I ended up doing, or should I just start a business right away? And everyone said, just get as much experience so you can learn from great people and see what they do really well and what you do really well, et cetera. And so I think always, like, you're never going to go wrong getting more experience and delaying grad school for a year.
Yeah, first of all, thank you. Congratulations on your retirement, and thank you for doing that work over those many years. I'm sure we all benefited from it. I'm in the delay camp. You know, just from the perspective of grad school being such a huge investment, financially, opportunity-wise. I think to spend a couple of years working in an industry and either validate what you think you want to do, or use it as an opportunity to sort of referencing the paralegal comments earlier, to sort of pump the brakes a little bit and say, you know what, I'm not as interested in this as I thought I was. Let me see if I can get some alternative experiences.
I would just say for me, it's a question is this what you want to do, or is this something that you think people want you to do? All right, so a lot of people say, I'm going to get my MBA right afterwards. It's like, well, why? Well, because I think I should have my MBA. Well, no, I think maybe you should go and find that out for yourself. I was going to go get an MBA shortly after undergrad, but then I started working, and then I changed careers, and I wound up, when I did go back for my master's, I got a master's in HR, which I never would have done right out of school because I wasn't in HR. I was in accounting. So I, if it's something that you're passionate about and you want to get a master's and it's going to give you an extra credential or leg up in the recruiting process, great. If you're not sure, I would be in the delay camp as well.
I think we have time for one more question.
All right, seeing as how this is the last question, I figured we'd keep it light. What's the strangest thing you've seen on a resume or answer that you've been given in an interview? And did that positively or negatively impact the person?
Good question.
So many to choose from.
So many.
It's always a little weird when you ask somebody why city and they take out their credit card. I'm always like, you should put that away. I don't want you to lose that. It's important. I know, it takes a couple days to get a new one in the mail, although we're working on that. That's happened a few times to me, and that's a little weird. I'll leave it there.
I had a young lady that was so nervous, really nervous, which I always try to calm people down in the interviews, and it was back in the day, and we had these big oak desks, at the firm. We were interviewing in the office, and she got so nervous, and I thought she was going to be sick. And in the middle of the interview, she kind of paused and then ducked under behind I couldn't see where she went, and then kind of came back up. And after that interview, I did not want to go around and see kind of what happened, and she was very nervous. We'll just so that's kind of the wildest thing that ever happened in an interview.
So she did not get hired.
She did not get hired.
Okay.
No, she did get my cleaning bill. So no, I'm just
I would say this is pre-interview, but we had someone emailed me this is my background, this is where I went to school, et cetera. I'm really interested in working for Way Up full time. So if I could please take you out for coffee. I know you like a grande iced coffee and a venti cup.
Wow.
So
Creepy.
soy milk and 2 Splenda from Starbucks, and I'll meet you at the one right near your office and he like named it, and I
So
freaked
is that,
out a
is
little
that
bit.
creepy or convincing?
So he was applying for an enterprise sales role, which requires you to really get to like know the customer and really understand, like, I want to be someone who like understands you and understands your needs. So at first I was like, this is really weird. But I brought him into our office so I could make sure if he was a creep, and we hired him, and he's amazing.
Wow.
So
And he brings you coffee every day.
I had a student for a while that was sending me, because we always talk about, the ability to demonstrate your interest in our industry a lot comes from the research that you're doing. So he was sending me newspaper clippings of articles that he thought was interesting in the mail, which is a weird choice.
Yeah, if it's your grandma, maybe,
Yeah,
but
exactly.
otherwise.
He stopped after a while. I didn't write back. I don't have time to write letters, but I wish I did.
I think it was you, Liz, that mentioned to me you've had job interviews where candidates will start eating lunch during the interview, or someone was shirtless during an interview. Is that one of you who told me that story?
during a Skype interview.
During a Skype interview. So there's a lot of strange things that go on out there, even among good candidates on paper, I guess.
He was like an LA kid, and he just didn't know. He was like, I'm going to the beach after this. So,
Okay. I think we have time for one last question. I want to turn to the future of work for a minute as our last question, and ask you to make a half-crazy prediction about the future. Right? There was a recent study by Oxford University, I'm sure we all read it, talking about how maybe 40% or more of all current occupations are going to be automated out of existence in the next few decades. What do you see in the future of work? Do you agree with that? And how do you see work changing over the next 10, 20 years?
Yeah, they always look. I'm always going first. So I'm the glass half full, bottle half full. I do think there'll be a lot of change, and I think there'll be jobs that'll be automated. I think there'll be new jobs that will be created as a result of that. In step with that, I think the biggest thing that we'll see, and you see some of it already. We talked about Uber and Airbnb. I think the way people work and the availability of jobs and the eligibility of people to work in different ways than they do today. That's going to evolve very, very quickly. So, you look at the 9-to-5 job, the career, the long career, the full-time worker, that will still be an option, but I think an increasing option will be gig economy, freelancing, project-based work, even more so, and it will transcend from products and basic services into professional.
So are these changes already impacting how employers are hiring? Because I hear a lot about employers saying things are changing so much that we want creative thinkers, people who can solve problems more than they may be able to address any particular skill, because things are changing so much, and so that's what we need.
Yeah, I think I completely agree with Dan, this idea of optionality in terms of where you work. And what we're seeing also is how you work is also rapidly changing. So the office of the future will be open. It will be less hierarchical. We'll have less managing directors or executive vice presidents or whatever you call them, and those folks won't have offices. So the CEO of Citi and his direct reports, the management team, just moved into a new floor at the bank. None of them have offices. They have glass partitions, and there's no assigned seating. You can sit down wherever you want. It's all cloud-based. You can work from home. People have actually documented flexible work plans. So not only the optionality of where you work, but also how you come to work will look very, very different in the next couple of years even.
completely agreed.
All right. I suggest, Aaron, tomorrow you ought to go and sit down in the CEO's chair and see what happens.
I have the right to. No, I'm kidding.
All right, well, I want to thank my outstanding guests, Dan Black, Aaron Goldberg, and Liz Wessel, for your inspiring advice today. Yes, absolutely. And if you'd like to listen to my podcast with other stimulating recruiters like Dan, Aaron, and Liz, visit cbsnewyork.com/yournextjob. And thank you all for being with us today.
Thanks, Stephen.
Thank you.
Thank you.